Welcome back to News Today here on the SABC News Channel. As we continue with our focus on Zimbabwe, we're now pleased to welcome Professor Kwandiwe Kondlo, who is also joining me alongside Professor David Moore, and we are deliberating on the current situation in Zimbabwe. Good afternoon, Professor Kondlo. Let's start with you. ZANU-PF probably at the instigation of the army ruling out Plan B, the impeachment. Does the party have the required 2-3 majority for the motion to sail through?
Look, in my view, I think ZANU-PF is sort of relying on the cooperation, possible cooperation of opposition parties to remove Mugabe. But at the same time, if ZANU-PF goes in parliament united and gets just a small fraction of support from opposition parties, I think they'll be able to move.
Professor Moore, we just heard from Professor Rupia here, who seems to think that the impeachment process could take forever. And of course, you have a different view to that. Why do you think it could be finished in as soon as Thursday?
Well, if everybody lines up and if the MDC is in... So you've got, what, 210 members?
Yeah.
If you have 105 members, or if you have enough members to make up... I don't know what quorum is. If it's the members or the members who are there. That's something we have to look at in the Constitution, if it mentions it. But and then, so you get 50% of the people to agree to present the motion. Then the motion goes to a subcommittee of senators, 9 people, senators and MPs, to consider this motion. If they agree, then it goes back to Parliament and 2/3 have to pass it.
Yeah.
If everybody's in line, it could happen in 3 days. So I think perhaps what Martin was considering, everything, including the party, would this impeachment process, which is under contestation within the party, will it be resolved by the December Congress? December, the second week in December is coming up very quickly.
Very quickly.
And this is, of course, when the G40 had their slate set up. This is what caused the fracas, caused them to push out Mugabe coming back, and having the military come in as a party. This is what's complicated about Zimbabwean politics, much of African politics, is the state and the party are so intertwined. So you have the military coming in saying, well, you know, we would like to settle a party dispute. Could you please resign, Mr. Mugabe? We can settle this in our own ways. And then he postpones, and he postpones again. As the complications become so complicated, maybe everybody just wants to go home and get some sleep and have the Congress.
What do you think should be the likely possible outcome there, Professor Kondlo?
Well, I think I fully agree with David. I read the Zimbabwean Constitution, and I never got the impression that really the impeachment should be so protracted and long as 3 months. I mean, from my reading of it, especially if you go to section 97(2) of the Zimbabwean Constitution, where it clearly states that the process begins when the motion is put before a joint sitting of Senate and the National Assembly. And then from there it goes to a small committee. Is called the Committee on Standing Rules and Orders.
Yeah.
Yeah? That committee appoints a committee of 9 people, including Senate and the National Assembly. But that composition of 9 must be reflective of the composition of Parliament as a whole, you see. Then they look into the reasons for the removal of the president, and then will come back to Parliament with a report, which is voted on, so the resolution is taken, you see, by a joint sitting of Senate and the National Assembly. That can be done within 3 days, if really there is pressure and things move smoothly.
But gentlemen, let's talk about this. You know, very interesting point you bring out, Professor Kondlo. The reasons for this impeachment, what could they possibly be, Professor Moore?
Well,
The sacking of Mnangagwa, and what else?
that he's brought the country to ruin. I think there's a mental disability or physical disability. So you might have a doctor's report. Doctors can get paid, but also you could say the guy is not thinking clearly, he's not fit to hold office, and for disciplinary against the Constitution and other disciplinary aspects. I don't know if you could. They're not going to go way back into history and say, you know, you killed so many people. So that'll be tricky. I think also what would influence the way the ZANU-PF politicians are thinking, and maybe even the MDC politicians, is who's next in line? Is it going to be Mnangagwa or is it going to be Mpoko?
Yeah.
We were talking about this.
Yeah.
And that's not clear yet. I think that's why Mugabe did not meet his deadline today, because he can't decide what to do with what happened yesterday.
What do you think, Professor Konle? Do you think Mpoko could be the leader to take Zimbabwe through this transitional period?
Well, with me, I think the ZANU-PF sort of has their duck in a row already, because they have actually reinstated Emmerson Mnangagwa.
Yeah.
And he's the acting president of the party. And I think that actually sets him in a position so that the ZANU-PF can be able to argue.
That's what I thought. He had the better support. Yeah. What do you think, Professor Mo?
Robert Mugabe is saying that was unconstitutional, that the Central Committee of the ZANU-PF was not set up properly. Some of those people were had been kicked out before by the G40, remember? So that's what they're contesting. Was this in line with the ZANU-PF constitution? I think that's what Mugabe is holding up on. As well as this, you know, maybe he's got to bring the police and the army and the CIO back together, because they are at a very fraught relationship.
But Dave, in my view, I think Mugabe can play all kinds of delaying tactics. He can. But the bottom line is that he has lost popular support. He has lost appeal to the Zimbabwean population.
Absolutely.
He can delay it. He can delay it technically. And we just hope that we don't have what happened in Libya, whereby the popular masses, out of anger, actually take things into their own hands.
Yeah, that's something something that we need to watch out for. Now, Professor, let's go back to this. I mean, a lot of people are blaming the army for not declaring an outright coup, and they're now saying this is why Mugabe is now playing the delaying tactics and saying, now I'm going to play up my cards. You did not do this constitutionally, so therefore I'm just going to keep going back and forth with you. Is this a correct assertion of how? Is this a coup or a coup?
Somebody says if it's a duck, if it walks like a duck, and
it probably is.
You have the military coming in. You have a president under house arrest. You have at least one person killed, Chombo's security guard.
Yeah.
But you have Mugabe going to confer degrees on people at Zimbabwe Open University. You have this press conference where everybody's shaking their hand, and the Gaddafi thing hasn't happened. And I don't think civil society would do that. Muchanga is talking about another march to State House. Remember the march on Saturday? They didn't go all the way to State House.
There's another protest for tomorrow.
There's a softness here, but it still is Mugabe's card. And not very many people want SADC to come in. There's a delegitimization of these regional bodies.
But why not, Professor? If you can't handle your own issues, you always bring in a third party to mediate. Isn't that how things are done?
Mediation or pushing disappointment with quiet diplomacy that's gone on in the past.
Yeah.
The big neighbor pushing little people around. There's still, remember the days when Mandela was around, Mugabe was very jealous of the new hero. There's still a bit of that, and to what well, this is maybe a question for somebody in political science. What could SADC do now? What could happen at this meeting? Who could they send in as a mediator that's legitimate? I mean, the priest there, Father Macaroni, is there. Who would be accepted? Kenneth Kaunda?
I mean, we hear that, unconfirmed reports that he might be actually convincing Mugabe to step down. Do you think?
Yeah, the possibility that I foresee is that there could be a joint SADC-AU advisory team to step into Zimbabwe, into the situation in Zimbabwe. But it's not a team which is really going to direct, except persuade.
Recommendations, as we've heard, Professor.
Persuade, and of course, remember, the sort of transition which is happening in Zimbabwe one can argue is actually directed by the army at the moment. Even though I'm still of the view, David, that, look, when things don't get resolved with the kind of popular excitement and anger and expectation that we've seen,
The people get fed up.
a situation similar to the Libyan situation,
The people get
whereby
fed up.
even the army itself is overcrowded. And Mugabe's life could actually be in danger.
And
Yes, it is a possibility, even though remote at the moment. Yes,
Mm.
because at the moment, what we can see, the soldiers are actually standing quite firmly to make sure that the transition is diplomatic, it's peaceful, the hero exits in a dignified way. They are really trying their best.
And speaking of a dignified exit, Professor Mo, let's wrap this up by giving your ascensions on what do you think about this? It's caused a lot of turmoil, this Mugabe possibly seeking political asylum here in the country. What do you think about that? Mixed reviews on that note.
I think Ethiopia would be the perfect place. Mengistu was allowed in to Zimbabwe, and he's been, I think he's still alive. He was running a restaurant just below the Avondale Shopping Center for a long time, giving lots of advice to the ZANU-PF regime. I think Ethiopia could return the favor.
Professors, thank you so much for joining us. That is Professor Mo and Professor Kondlo, both joining me in studio to analyze all the latest developments here or taking place in Zimbabwe. They're joining us live here in studio.